Welcome to Inkwell Spoken Presents Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny. I am your host, Reggie Key, and today I have with me a long-standing friend, Tisa Silver Canady. Oh, I'm sorry, did I leave out the doctor?
You don't have to call me doctor,
We
it's
should
all
just put it
family
out
here.
there so people know though. Dr. Tisa Silver Canady. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me. I'm intrigued by this.
Good. I'm glad you're intrigued because I've been intrigued for about a while myself. So I'm in this place now where I'm just trying to go one-on-one. Normally I do this in workshops with about 20 plus people, but since moving and relocating down to the South, this is how I want to begin to engage people because in workshops it's such a broad topic that people don't get a chance to actually delve into personally what their genius is. They just kind of get an idea of how I'm presenting it to them. So this is really unique because it'll give us a chance to actually walk through, not just generically speaking, but what, Tisa, is your specific genius? And so that was a rhetorical question, but here is the first official question to launch us. Tisa, do you consider yourself to be a genius?
I don't know that I consider myself to be a genius. I think that sometimes I might have genius moments, but when I think about a genius, it's such a heavy title. I don't know that I could say I'm a genius.
Okay, all right, that's fair. I can say off the top that you're a genius because you connected me and my wife. You saw that, like, I got to put that out there. You had that aha
I
moment. So
wasn't thinking about that moment. Okay.
I just always got to give you props. Every once in a while, I just got to put that out there, man. Like you saw something and connected us. I am ever like grateful to you for that. But let's get back into like you have this. Everyone has a preconceived notion about what or who a genius is, and it's very interesting because whatever that preconceived notion is, that begins to define our own genius. So my second question for you is, who's the first person that comes to mind? What's the first name? What's the first face you see when you hear this word genius?
Albert Einstein.
Absolutely. That's the number one answer. You're doing good. Now, not taking anything away from Einstein, but there's something very unique that happens when we associate genius to Einstein. We automatically disassociate it from ourselves because we're like, well, I ain't Einstein. Like, I don't know what E equals mc squared is. I don't care what the theory of relativity is all about. So therefore, I can't be a genius because I'm not thinking in the way that Einstein thought. And not taking anything away from Einstein, but he was just one type of genius, right? And so the more we kind of realize that there are different lanes and different types of genius, the more we can try to figure out where we fit within it. You said you have genius moments, and I guarantee you those moments that you see are not fleeting. They're actually a part of your makeup, your DNA, who you are, and it drives what you do and what you've been doing over the past 20 years since we've been out of college. So to help us kind of wrap our minds around this, I have a quote for you that purportedly comes from Einstein, but you can't ever tell with the interwebs, they be lying. But it doesn't really matter where it comes from. It's just something to kind of open up your mind. So are you ready for the quote?
I'm ready.
All right, it goes a little something like this. If you judge a fish by how well it can climb a tree, it'll spend its entire life thinking it's stupid. Have you ever heard that before?
No, I have not.
All right, so how's that hitting you?
Oh, it hit me. And everything that you said hit me because they're just these messages. I think back to, I don't remember the first time I heard about Albert Einstein, but whenever the word genius comes up, that's always the person gets pointed to. And if we look at physicals, I'm nothing like Albert Einstein. If we look at subject matter expertise, I'm nothing like Einstein. So there's just like when you get this vision in your head of what something is supposed to look like, and then you compare it to yourself, like you said, you get farther and farther and farther away from what that definition is. And so it's really making me rethink how that came to be my definition, and also how that makes younger people feel, if that's
Absolutely.
still the definition of what a genius is.
Absolutely. When I go into schools, he is by far the number one answer. And so when I go to a classroom and I ask, hey, who amongst you thinks you're a genius? Maybe 1 or 2 people out of 20 will raise their hand. And so this is some programming that's happening that's getting us away from what our true mark is. Each of us is individual. As an individual, is you. I'm saying this word unique for the 3rd time, but it is. It's like your fingerprint. There's something about you, Tisa, that is unique from anyone else. You already know that, but that's something. Your genius is wrapped up on the inside of it. And so when we start thinking about, and I like that you use this phrase, subject matter expert, because genius is called different things in different environments. Subject matter expert is what genius is in corporate America. We recognize that you can be a subject matter expert. We don't have anyone that comes to our mind when we hear of subject matter expert, but that word genius, drives us to Einstein. And so this quote that I just spoke about is very interesting because it's saying there's some imagery there that's kind of interesting. When you think about a fish, where do fish belong? Where do they thrive?
In the water.
In the water. Like they're streamlined, their whole design, though there's many different types of fish, their whole design is pretty much the same. They're streamlined, they have scales and gills that help them function at a maximum capacity in the water. So already when you see that this fish is trying to climb a tree, something is already off. It's not in its natural element. It's not in its natural lane. And so whoever comes along and tries to tell this fish, you should be climbing this tree, they have disregarded what this fish is supposed to be doing, what it's designed to do, in favor of whatever they want it or they think it should be doing. And we find ourselves in that place a lot where people would try to. It reminds me when I was at the University of Delaware, somebody, we were at a function and celebrating scholarships or whatever, and somebody just came up to me and was like, "Hey, so you got a football scholarship? Just assume."
Wow.
And I was like, "Yeah, nah, actually, it's computer engineering." And then their mouth dropped, and I could see their whole paradigm shift. And that's what this interview is about, just shifting paradigms, because we've gotten accustomed, some of us have gotten accustomed to other people defining who we are. And if other people aren't defining it, we're defining who we are, but sometimes we do it incorrectly. And so what's going to happen, Tisa, if this fish stays out of water long enough?
Oh, the fish is going to die.
It's going to die, right? And so that's what I see around me. I see dying genius around me. And I feel like it's been my place, my purpose, one of my purposes, to revitalize, resuscitate, and resurrect the genius that's around me. So what else do I want to talk about as it relates to this quote? The tree, we're going to bring this up a little later, but the tree represents a system. And that this system, and I feel like there's like an other part or other element to this quote that's not visible, but it's like this person who's on the sideline, or people on the sideline that keep coming by and saying like, "You ain't climbed this tree yet, dumb fish," right? And eventually the fish is like, "Hey, something must be wrong with me, because they're telling me this is what I should be doing." And so, if we throw Einstein into this quote, he's a bear. He climbs trees. That's what he's supposed to be doing. But the fish and the bear aren't the same. And we can't judge them in the same criteria. So that's the stance that we're going to take as it relates to understanding what genius is. And then we're going to use 3 components that help us figure out what your unique genius is and everyone's unique genius is. All right?
Okay.
Those 3 components are your passion, your talent, and your purpose. All right? Mm-hmm. What else you got going on? I know you're always thinking. Have you got any other thoughts before I go on?
Oh, I'm thinking like, who else, other than Albert Einstein, can I, who else can I look to, including myself in that, as geniuses? And how can I project that kind of message, especially to the young people in my life? Because you really got me thinking back to how we've been programmed to think that, this one person is the mode of a genius. And if that message is reinforced, like you were saying, people walking by telling the fish, "Oh, you gonna climb that tree yet?" And you just keep getting that reinforcement of a message that's wrong, you internalize that. And that's damaging to you, as a person. And I'm just thinking like, I never want to do that to anyone else. So I've got some deprogramming to do and some reprogramming to the people that I deal with, especially the young people in my life.
Yes, this is why I have you on the show, because this is how genius begins to work. First, you internalize it for yourself. Mm-hmm. And then you turn outward and say, okay, who else can I impact with this, right? You don't keep it. Genius is not something that you keep to yourself. It's something that once you get empowered, you're like, I need to empower some other people in the same way. So where I want to go, you said something that I wanted to touch on as far as not the young people that you are in contact with. I mean, they are important because that's where I started my messages with young people. But when you start going back and looking at like, how long have I been thinking this? It's something that you can't even really date. It's just almost imprinted on us, right? And this whole message, I can't claim this message for myself. Yes, I wrote this book, but the idea and the branding of Genius is Common was something that came from a guy named Bruce George. I don't know if you recall Bruce George, but he was a name. He was behind Def Poetry Jam when it came out. Yeah, on HBO. And so him and I connected. And a couple of years ago, I was like, what are you doing now? Because you always are into something. He's like, look, I'm trying to remove the elite status of this word genius and make it accessible to everybody. So he was like, if you could just help me spread this message. So I began to get components and pieces of this, right? So I can't claim all this for myself. Even as we move into the first component of passion, I can't claim that. I'll let you know what my inspiration was behind that, because I have a very unique take on passion too. So even as we kind of deconstructed this word genius and we're building it back up, I'm going to do the same with passion. So Tisa, what comes to mind? What words come to mind when you hear that word passion?
For me personally, I think education, empowerment. I also think about spreading love. And ultimately that comes from God, but those are probably my top three.
Okay. So I'm gonna touch on the last one, love, right? Because that's kind of, it makes sense. Passion and love kind of go together, but I'm gonna do something completely different with passion as it relates to this equation. But it's on the same spectrum of love, but it's at the exact opposite end of the spectrum. I'm gonna come from a place of hate. I'm going to tell you that the thing that you are passionate about, as it relates to your genius anyways, is the thing that you hate. When you look around you and you see things not operating in the way that impacts people the right way, like you already started zoning in on this fish, like somebody is telling this fish, who is telling this fish that they need to stop that, right? Mm-hmm. And so you can make it your life's mission. Like, I am not going to let a single other fish come out this ocean, come out this water and begin to be told that you need to climb this tree. Nobody, no other fish will ever be told that in their life, right? Yes. And that place of, I know it's a strong word, but it gets the teens talking. Teens will tell you what they hate real quick, right? But when you start focusing on what you hate, what it's really about is the thing that's in society, in your community, in your neighborhood, on your workplace that's broken, that affects you in a negative way. Like when you feel it, and sometimes it's something that even comes from our childhood, trauma from our childhood. When we feel it, we're like, oh, I don't like how that made me feel. That made me feel like a fish out of water. I don't like it. And so you internalize that. And when you get older, you may heal from it, but whenever you see it operating, you're like, oh, I hate that. You might start saying stuff like, when you see it hitting other people the way it hits you, or hitting other people in a way that's unjust, you're like, somebody should fix that though. That's some brokenness that somebody should fix. Can somebody, and if you find yourself, Tisa, constantly saying somebody should, can somebody, guess who the somebody is? It's you. Right? Because would you agree that the world is broken?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, right? There's a lot of things broken in this world. And I believe that the brokenness is hanging around longer than it should, because everybody else keeps saying like, somebody should fix that. Not me though, but somebody should fix that. But if you begin to realize that somebody is you, then you'll begin to kind of dissect it, figure out why it's operating like that, and then do something about it. And this now gets into where I call that tree of system, because most of the time, Tisa, the things that we hate, they're not small, they're big. When I start talking to kids, they're like, after they say a little, funny stuff like I hate tomatoes, and I don't know what you want to do, but I hate spicy. Then they start getting stuff like, hey, I hate bigotry, I hate racism, I hate hypocrisy, I hate, and I'm like, now we're talking. Now we're talking about something that's large, that because you're passionate about it, you won't care how big it is. You won't care what your impact, whether your impact is great or small, you will keep being driven towards it. It's like gas in your tank. You will keep driving towards it. It won't matter about how much you get paid to do it. You'll do it for free just to address this thing that's in front of you that you're like, this shouldn't be here. This shouldn't be operating this way. It's very much a David and Goliath type of response. Right? He was like, man, ain't nobody else gonna do nothing about this cat. He talking about, like, really? Give me my slingshot. Right? we'll pick back up on that later, because when you get into your talent is your slingshot. It's your tool to address the thing that's broken in the world. And David knew. He was like, they tried to give him King Saul's equipment. He was like, nah, this don't fit me. Get this off of me. I have killed lions and tigers and bears and whatever with these slingshots. Give me my slingshot and 5 smooth stones. That's all I need. Clear the pathway. I'm going right for this thing's head. And that's when you know you tapped into something that will drive you, that will then begin to dictate what your element is, so that you can figure out what your genius is. So I'm gonna stop for a second. How's that hitting you?
Oh, I'm thinking of some things. I've definitely thought of a few. The first thing that came to mind was that it really bothers me when I see people robbed of the opportunity to make an informed choice. So, and there's so many layers to that, so many reasons behind it. But if you have time for a story, I can tell you where one example where I had this feeling and it was just, ooh, and I didn't look around and say, well, who's going to do something about it? I said, oh, they got the one this time.
So messed around.
Yes. So to make a long story short,
you don't have to, by the way. Just make it don't gotta be short. Just
okay. Well, I'll tell it. Let's see how well I remember it. So I was looking for a car, and it had been, looking all over the place and kind of put the search off. But one day, me and my husband were on spring break, and so he's looking at cars, and I saw this car online. Like, I'm going to call that dealer and ask them if this is the price, because that price just doesn't sound right. So called 3 different times just to say, is this the price? That's the price. Okay. So, I did what I was supposed to do, went to my credit union, got my little financing stuff squared away, went up to see the car, test drove the car. I liked it. My husband liked it. He could fit in it, which is a big deal because he's super tall. So I'm, looking at him test drive, like, he looks so comfortable and I like this car and we're going to get this car. And for me, like, when I shake your hand on a deal, like, that means it's all out there. Everybody knows what's happening on both sides. We're making a deal. And so shook hands, waited a little while for the paperwork. Admittedly, got caught up in the moment of it all, glanced over the paperwork, thought I saw, major items, and I missed a big one. And so maybe a week after having the car, something went wrong with it. And I called the dealership to speak to the salesperson. I'm like, hey, I got this issue with my car. Can I bring it in? And they're like, oh, that salesperson is not here right now. We'll pass you through later. I'm like, that's kind of shady. I just bought the car a week ago, but once they get the money, then it's, the courting phase of the sale is over. Yep. So I went and pulled out the contract paperwork and saw that these people had changed a digit on the price of the car. And then had extended the length of the term of the car. And I'm sitting here looking at this paperwork like, you, finance professor, Dr. T money, all of that. How did you let this happen? And then I replayed like the whole day in my mind of like the different ways that they created this situation where, you shake hands, but then there's a pause and you get cookies and iced tea and all of that stuff. Right. Then they talk to you about different things when you're signing the paperwork so that you're not, paying as much attention as you should. And that doesn't excuse that it got by me, but I just looked at how this system was set up to make it so that I could not make an informed choice. Mm-hmm. And so from that moment, I just started to explore, more of the paperwork, more things started going wrong with the car. And at that point, I went back to the dealer and said, listen, like, you all are going to have to give me some money back or something. And of course, with them, it's, oh, well, you got to talk to this person. He's not here today. Next day, oh, you got to talk to that person. So I said, listen, I don't know what y'all are used to, but this right here is not going to stand. And at one point, the manager, I remember him telling me, well, you really think that like you're gonna beat us? And I was like,
Word?
okay, yes, he did. And I was just like, oh, it's like that. It's on.
You're
You
lying.
see this face right here? You remember this face because you will see it again. And I told him, be prepared to cut my check because I'm going to get my money back. So it took about 2 months, but through the process of like advocating for myself, finding out more about how dealers will pad interest rates and, you know, play the middleman between the financier and the customer, finding out how they just add all these ridiculous fees for things that you don't need or don't have to pay that much for it. Like I learned so much about this process of how people are taking advantage of it. It was far deeper than me missing a digit. Like this was really, really deep. Even got to a place where I requested all of the sales documents, the credit application, found out they had falsified my credit application, even though I had good credit. And so that right there was the point where I had them. And 2 months in, we had a deal. Cut my check, take this car back, wipe it off of my credit report, and we're done. The only thing that I was not allowed to do was talk to the media about the situation. That was a stipulation of the deal to get my car back.
Wow.
Yes, because they knew if I came out with all of the stuff that they did, falsifying my credit report, bait and switch, selling me a wrecked car, that an independent mechanic told me, you know, they did this to you because you're a woman. And I just was like, oh no, see, there was just more fuel being added to the fire. And at the root of it was, for whatever reason, they felt like I was not worthy of having a choice. This is what they were going to do. They created conditions to make things go in the direction that they wanted to, and they robbed me of my opportunity to make an informed decision. And that feeling of helplessness or being exploited, also being discriminated against, all of that wrapped into this being robbed of my own, what I felt like was my autonomy. It made me say, oh no, we're going to fix this situation. And I'm going to tell everybody I can, shy of going to the media, about this particular dealer and things to avoid. So I ended up linking up with a consumer advocacy group, the Maryland Consumer Rights Coalition. And the year after that, I ended up winning a Volunteer of the Year award with a citation from the governor.
Going in that passing
yes. And that's what it stems from. What you said, it's hate. Hate is a strong word, but I hate the idea that someone is going to be taken advantage of because of what they look like or where they're from or just because, you know, I hate that. And I don't want that for anyone else. And I found kind of my place in the financial realm of that. But just really that, I had a lot of hate going on during that situation.
So question, did this happen before or after your first book?
This happened after my first book.
Okay. Can you just name your book out there real quick, just for everybody?
Okay. So my first book is called The Time Value of Life, Why Time is More Valuable Than Money. And the book, it's about life lessons, but also personal finance lessons. And it was so humbling to have written a book about that and then to be taken advantage of in this way. And one thing that came up during all the, you know, the events that I was doing, people were like, I'm so surprised that you're talking about this, you know, and I'm like, why? Like, I made a mistake. Newsflash, I make them frequently, you know, we're human. Why wouldn't I talk about this? And they were saying that, you know, there's a level of guilt or shame there for people who, you know, get something like a car where other people see it and say, oh, looking good at your new ride or things like that. And then a month later, what happened to your car? And you have to explain that. I'm like, I just explained it. Like, they got me and I got my money back. You know, that's just what it is. There's no shame there. It happened. But that's where this is making me think of something you said earlier about the genius, is that if it's truly genius, you don't keep it to yourself. That's something that you share with other people. And so when I figured out what was really happening, I was like, oh, I got to get out there and like tell as many people about this as possible so that they don't have to go through the same thing.
Exactly. So the transparency part is huge, because if we're being honest with ourselves, we don't help. And oftentimes, and I'm saying we generically, we don't help as many people as we could, because we would have to expose some of our trauma, some of the things that we did wrong. And most people really aren't comfortable doing that. When we get into hate, most people hate failure. And so when you cop to a failure, it's like, oh man, but I'm supposed to be flawless though. I'm not supposed to make any errors. And that's another flawed programming that we have to get ourselves out of. Because I mean, even in figuring out the three components of this genius equation, you're going to fail. Like, it's like putting together a puzzle. Nobody puts a puzzle together flawlessly. Like every piece they touch is the right piece, right? Like you have to kind of figure out the angle and make sure that you get everything right. And I have an acronym for people, and it's like FAIL is the first attempt in learning.
First attempt in learning. I'm gonna write that down.
Write that down. Because it's like, as long as you're actually learning from your mistake, it's not a fail, it's a teaching moment.
Lesson, yeah.
Right? And the teaching moment becomes, first you teach yourself, and then naturally you want to teach others. So I have this example. I got a story too.
Okay.
That gets into teaching, and it helps us transition into talent. There were these 10 little boys, because remember, we're talking about the thing that you hate is the thing that's broken in the world, but it's the thing that's broken that you are destined to fix though, because of your focus on it, right? Some people, when they find their passion, they'll get upset because everybody else is not as passionate as them about it. And it's like, they got their own passion to worry about. Can everybody hate the same thing? There will be some other people that you'll find along the way that were like, yeah, I hate that too. But, you can't expect everybody to just adopt what it is that's your passion, because it's unique to you. So I went to this elementary school once. I was invited by the principal, and there were these 10 little boys in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, all in one class, all day. So you already know, like, that's not normal. Something's not right. So they were all on IEPs, what we call, individual education plan, what we would have known as special education back in the day. And so she's like, can you just come in and weekly just talk to them, just encourage them? I'm like, all right, sure. So I was still workshopping this idea of genius. So I was like, I'm going to talk to them about genius, and they're going to love it, man. I came in and asked the first question. So who amongst you, thinks you're a genius? They looked at me like, dude, you got the wrong class. Who do you think? I don't know what you thought this was, but I ain't no genius. Like, they were offended. Tisa, like, they looked at me like, wow, how dare you call me that? Because the affirmation that I was doing was positive, but their negative affirmations, they were more accustomed to. You dumb, you a fish that can't climb a tree. Like, you have ADHD, you have ADD. You're emotionally unbalanced, you're disruptive. And they had gotten used to those labels that had been put on them, to the point where when somebody came with something that was more aligned to lift them up, they couldn't even receive it. And so I was like, all right, cool, I got one for you. I was like, tell me now, before I tell you what the question was, you already know what it is, because I already told you, like, what do you hate? If you would have asked this fish what it hated, I believe it would point two things out to you. It would say the tree, and then, because remember, the tree represents a system, and it would be like this constant barrage of, why aren't you climbing this tree yet? Why aren't you doing this yet? Right? Nobody is putting it in the water. Everybody just keeps killing it by telling it, like, you're supposed to be in this element. So keep that in mind. When I asked these 10 little boys, what do you hate? These 10 little boys, Tisa, who could never agree on anything, what to play, when to play it, right? They all universally told me the same thing. What do you think it is that they told me they hated?
I'm so curious. I don't know.
School. It was like, we hate school, Mr. Key. Now what? And it was like, we messed your whole like message up, didn't we? And I was like, no, you didn't actually. Because if you think back to what I said, and the thing that you hate is the thing that you were destined to fix. I said, I'm looking at 10 future educators. And it was like, oh, snap. Like, they started backing up. I'm like, what's the problem? Let's talk. And I said, let me help you explain, though, like, where I'm coming from. Like, the school system is like the world. It's broken. You talk to any teacher, and I don't think there's any teacher they get nervous when I start talking about, tell me what you hate. They're like, why do we just let this dude in my classroom? What is when I start saying like, yeah, but the school system is broken, and some of you are future educators, the ones who told me you hate math, English, whatever particular subject that you hate is because you're likely a future teacher in that subject. And so they start listening, like the teachers are like, yeah, that actually might make sense. So this is what I told them. I said, look, there's 8 different learning styles, right? At most, schools are only teaching from 3. And if you're not a visual learner, an auditory learner, or a left-brained learner, meaning logic makes sense, math makes sense to you. If you're a right brain, or if you're a kinesthetic learner, meaning you got to move around to understand what's going on. But every time you move around, sit down, be still. You can't move, right? If you're exploratory or expeditionary, meaning you got to put your hands on stuff. But every time you put your hands on stuff, keep your hands to yourself, right? If you're one of these other 3 learning styles, you're going to be made to feel ostracized, alienated, marginalized, like a fish out of water. You're going to be like, I hate this place. Because all the information that I'm supposed to be learning is literally being spoken to me in another language that I don't understand. Something must be wrong with me, right? And then ADD comes, and it's like, that's what's wrong with me. I'm dysfunctional, right? But what I told them was, if you, instead of running away from the thing that you hate, if you go get educated and become a teacher, let your learning style become your teaching style and go back into the system that rejected you. Now you're going to start reaching and connecting to other people with the same learning style. Now we're going to have teachers who are more diverse, right? And now the system begins to thrive. This is like game changing. This is revolutionary, because I mean, this even challenges how the school systems are set up, how I'm looking at it. So, I just planted that seed in them, because I'm like, yeah, we keep saying that this thing is broken, but we keep pushing out the solution with how we're labeling them. So what you think about that?
Well, my husband is a teacher, so and I have he teaches 5th grade math. And so, going to volunteer at his school and through my time as teaching, like, I know for both of us, like, we look at the students and we're trying to read signals of, I get it, or I'm interested in this, or I don't get it. And when we see the signal, I don't get it, we're wired to try to find another way for them to get it. For me, I usually point to money, because people understand money very well. Sometimes I use food, because everybody eats, but it's just this desire to find something relatable for them so that they can have the light bulb moment too. Right. And so I totally agree with you on schools, because, and I feel for the teachers, because they have so many, there's so much material that they have that they're told to get through. And then there's some people that are, feeling like they have to teach to the test. And so it's like the goal of learning or success at learning seems as though it is secondary to assessing, or getting people through this material in a certain amount of time and achieving a certain score on a certain test. To me, I know that there are rewards and things tied to those outcomes, but my heart is for, is this student learning something? Are they leaving me better than they came in? And that part, like you said, this system is broken. We're talking to children in language that doesn't match their learning language. And then when they don't adjust to our system, we label them and place them on the outside. And it's reinforced year after year after year. So it's I feel all of that.
And I know you feel it, because that at its core is taking away the option to learn. Which is the thing that you said you can't stand. Like, I can't stand when I don't have the option, or somebody does not have an option. When you first said that, one of the first things that I realized that, and by the way, this whole idea of, what it is that you hate is the thing that you were destined to fix, is found in a book by Mike Murdoch called The Assignment. And very simply, he's saying, if you find out what it is that you hate, it's a Christian author. He's like, if you find out what it is that you hate, you found out what you were put on this planet to fix. You found your assignment. And so he very much links the two. And that's where I got this component from.
Mm-hmm.
But once you tap into that and you understand that, okay, I have something that's your element, right? That creates your lane. The first thing that I remember hating was when I got into financial aid, and I started seeing like this is not clear, almost on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like they're trying to confuse people to deter them from their natural right. Every child that goes through and graduates high school should have the right and option to go to higher education, to go into college. But what we're saying, what our education system is saying without saying it is, you don't belong here. But what they're doing is they're doing it by raising the tuition price every year. Yeah, financial aid is going up, but tuition rate is going like this, and that gap gets bigger and bigger every year. And what that gap is telling people is, you don't belong here. You can't go to college. We'd never say it out loud,
Mm-hmm.
but you know, as I think the FAFSA has gotten better over the years, but still, even if you go through the application successfully, the amount of money that you're given is like thrown into a black hole. Like this is great, but it's not really fixing my situation. And now we're getting into loans, and now we're getting into debt. And I mean, I know that's personal to you because that's what I know you advocate against, how to come up with these financial plans and systems, and looking at your resources and just being more responsible with how to make a financial plan work for your benefit, for whatever it is, whether it's a car, whether it's a house, whether it's school, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I completely feel that, just like not having an option to do a thing just because of how a system is set up.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's me right now. And I'm focusing on student loan borrowers right now because I know that, people will look at student loans and say, oh, it's not a crisis. They're guaranteed by the federal government for the most part. So it wouldn't be like the subprime mortgage crisis when property values, went down. Everything was, it was possible that the whole economy would sink,
Yep.
Student loans aren't that way. They're guaranteed by the government. So people look at it from that standpoint and say, well, if people don't pay, the government will just pay it because they're guaranteed. But in talking with someone else who told me, well, yeah, it's not a crisis that way, but don't you think that it's still a crisis, like a personal crisis? And I had to step back and say, wow, like I was so into the finance space that I was thinking about it like an economy threatening crisis,
Sure.
not a personal crisis. And now I speak to people every day who have student loans and don't know, how to repay them. Sometimes they don't know how much their balance is. They don't know who their servicers are or the point of contacts for making payments. And they don't know about benefits that are able to get them out of that debt or available to get them out of that debt. And so for me, it's really hard to read through the stuff, like you said, like financial aid, I'm reading through these documents about student loan benefits and thinking, you're going to lose 90% of people in the first paragraph because this doesn't read like you want someone to understand it. But having worked in a financial aid office, I get why they put everything out there. It's so that you can say it's all out there. You can read it, it's all there. But if you put it all out there and it reads like an encyclopedia, you run the risk that one, a lot of people aren't going to understand it. And two, a lot of people don't have the patience to sit there and read through an encyclopedia to find the 2 paragraphs that actually apply to them.
They know that though.
Yes,
like a lot of people, they know that.
That's the thing. Like, I will do that. I will read through it just because I like to learn, so I'll read it and I'll figure out this is what applies to me. And I'll make sure I tell other people, if you're in this situation, you read this part, just that part, but most people, I don't think they're like that. So it's that space of the debt and trying to manage the debt and seeing how people get trapped by debt. That's also something that I hate because it comes back to people being robbed of the opportunity to make a choice. And debt is an instrument that causes so many people to lose opportunities, to feel as though they've lost their freedom. And it's also something that a lot of people carry with guilt and shame, so they don't talk about it.
Yep. It's exploitive at the end of the day because they know that these people who who are behind, because it's not all federal. Like I worked for a private college before I left and started doing my own thing, and federal loans weren't enough. Like you had to go into these private lenders, and they, they can operate however they choose, right? And the more, and they know psychologically, if you put a bunch of, the more information you put in front of somebody, when you have this carrot on the other end, like, yeah, okay, I'll just sign that. Can I get my money go? Right? Can I, hey, what amount should I take? Well, what's the room in your budget? I'll just fill up my whole budget. Like, no, don't do that. You don't have to, just because you can take 40. That's like when you get a home. Hey, you qualify for $1 million. Like, that's nice, but I'm looking for 500,000 though.
Yes.
I'm not going to try and go for the max. But we're gonna get, that's a whole nother, I can feel us going into a whole nother place.
Yes.
Back and go to the next component, which is not passion, but talent. So remember I said earlier when I was talking about David had his passion, but then he knew what his tool was. He was like, don't give me somebody else's equipment. Give me what I'm used to working with. And that thing that you're used to working with, that thing that's in your hand already, is your talent. And so, I deal with a lot of people who say, well, I don't know what my talent is, or flat out say, I don't have one. And I'm like, well, talent is generational though. So if you can't see it in yourself, look to your parents, look to your grandparents, and you got 2 sets of grandparents. So you have a wealth of information to begin to explore. Look at one of your parents' hobbies. Their talent might have become a hobby once you came along, because they had to push it to the side to make sure that they could provide for you. But this talent is generational. It's on the inside of us already. It's what's already in our hand, right? When Moses was told to go deliver the Israelites from Egypt, he was like, I don't speak well, right? I don't know how I'm gonna do this. And he was like, I'll give you your brother. Your brother's a speaker. He's like, okay, but I got a stutter, right? He kept going back. And then, God was like, dude, what's in your hand though? Look at this raggedy staff. He's like, yeah, put that staff on the ground up. Turn into a snake, touch that snake by the tail, it turns into a staff again. He said, you got all you need. Just take that with you. And that's what talent is, right? We recognize this whole idea that talent is generational, something that's already on the inside of you. We recognize it again in other people. We see athletes who have generational talent, and we believe that, like, yeah, Bronny, yeah, they got a lineage that they form, right? And we look at entertainers, like, yeah, the Jackson family, their whole family is musicians, right? And we accept that, but we reject it in ourselves. And we have to understand, what is it that we have that comes from before us that's now manifesting? Because a lot of times what came before us, our ancestors, they didn't have the resources, the time and the space to really utilize that thing the way we now have. And so we have an opportunity to look and say, what is my talent, right? And so I believe I know what your talent is, because I see what you're using to help people that have been marginalized, to help people who have had their choices removed from them. But I want to give you a chance to identify it. What would you say, Tisa, one of your talents is?
I think one for sure is making things accessible. So I will be that person that reads through the entire book, and I might put hash marks through 90% of it, get to the meat of it that matters, and I can translate it so that anyone can understand it. Like I like to write procedures for things, and using words that aren't SAT words, or assuming that a person is picking up the procedures and starting at a certain level of knowledge. Like, I like to assume the person knows nothing. Take this person who knows nothing and then share with them something meaningful in a way that they can understand it and apply it. Like that really, I think, making things accessible. I think that's probably one of my gifts.
And would you say that you see or saw that in either of your parents or grandparents?
Oh my goodness, yes. My mother was an accountant. Very, complicated work. My father is an electrical engineer, another complex subject. But, I would go with my dad sometimes. He would do electrical work for his friends and just watch him, wire stuff, put up a new ceiling fan, do whatever. Like, oh, that's all it is. Like, it's not, he never made it seem like it was something so complicated.
Only I can do this. You can't.
I couldn't do it. Yeah, it was just, okay, flip this here, look at this, look at that, click that, test this. Like, oh, okay. And with my mother, the accountant side, all of those numbers and, categories of codes for this and codes for that, you know, complex. But when you have someone who can say, all right, well, start here, look there, plug this in, just give it to you basically. And it's something that my mother, we just, we joked about her a lot because sometimes her directions would just be so basic that we would say, Mom, I know a little bit more than that. So can you, skip me to step 6 or 7, But again, that is, looking back now, like seeing how both of my parents took things that a lot of people viewed as complex, or even in my dad's case, dangerous, messing around with electricity.
Yeah.
It made it seem like, no big deal. Just follow this script right here. You'll be fine.
That reminds me, I had this electrician come through my house recently, and I know a little bit about electricity, computer engineering, whatever, right? And I tried to switch out this outlet with some USB, some USB ports and plugs, and it just wasn't working for me. He came through and fixed it, but he didn't just fix it. He showed me, because I was like, look, I thought I did X and Y and Z right, and this. And he said, yeah, but you missed this right here, and he showed me. And so that enabled me, empowered me to then go and change another outlet on my own. He didn't just keep it proprietary and then, cost me this astronomical amount of money. The next time I needed to do it, I didn't have to call him because I could do it on my own. Your dad reminded me of that when you just said that. Here's what I heard for you. So you have one of these unique geniuses, though you use it very specifically, it's generic enough so that you can apply it to different industries should you choose to do so. Right now, you're in the finance industry. It's direly needed there, and we appreciate where you are. But here's the word that came to mind for you. You're a polyglot. Have you ever heard that word?
I'm writing that down. I've heard it, but I've never paid attention enough to read what it was.
I'm not saying it in the typical sense of the word. Polyglot is somebody who can speak multiple languages. So when you hear that, you think Spanish, Russian, whatever. But your multiplicity in linguistics is these learning styles. That's how you're able to translate. Hey, look, that's a left brain approach, but I can get it in this right brain approach. That's whatever approach is needed. Because I heard you say that you and your husband will sit there and kind of see like how the kids are responding or not responding. And in your brain, you're already making a calculation like, okay, I need to do it from this direction because that didn't click, right? Mm-hmm. And so that makes you, in my mind, as it relates to your genius, it makes you a polyglot, someone who can speak multiple learning languages or learning styles for the purpose of disseminating information so that the masses, the most amount of people, so you're maximizing who can understand the one piece of information that's being said. So, a piece of information comes in and you stand at the bias section where you can now split into several different languages for people to understand. And knowing that something, I believe you're already doing it, but it takes sometimes, Tisa, somebody outside of you to say, hey, look, what you're doing is this. And you're like, oh, snap. And you'll be able to function in it a little better.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And so, I'm excited for you though, because I don't know if you, I don't know, the last thing we want to be told is you got more work to do.
I'm used to it.
Because you stand in this area where you can do this, you can go into multiple sectors and apply that same know-how that you got from your parents to make something basic for people to understand. You can function and operate in that in various elements. Now, here's the thing though, because you don't want to overwork yourself. Passion sometimes can cause us to go into overdrive. Mm-hmm. And start to take on everything. We're like Pac-Man, just gobble up everything. I'm gonna do it. But what you are uniquely positioned to do, Tisa, is to develop teams, develop people, and teach them. Like this is very much something that is teachable from you. Not everybody can teach this, but it's teachable from you how to be this polyglot. So that when you see this issue, like, you know what though, now I got a team. Hey, look, go handle that over there. You got genius that's specifically catering that right there. But make sure when you get there, I'm gonna teach you how to spot the different learning styles and then service the learning styles. I see you doing that if you're not already doing it.
Mhm. I'm working on it. I just finished up a train the trainer program.
Mm,
This was training social work graduate students to be student loan coaches to their peers. And it's so much, it's better now knowing that I have a group of people who
yeah,
I have trained that can now do some of the work that I've done. And it takes some of the burden off of me because there's not enough of me to advise every student loan borrower out there. But if we can keep training and training others, and also in addition to giving them the information and making sure it's accessible, just empowering the people that have loans to be able to go to the right places to find the information, to make decisions on their own and not make it so that, like the example you said, where somebody does something for you and charges you an exorbitant amount of money. And then if something goes wrong, you got to call them back again.
right.
You can't do anything on your own. That's one thing that I am very passionate about. I don't want you to have to come back to me 15 times because if you have
Yeah,
to come back, I didn't do what I was supposed to do the first go round. So I want people to be educated, but also empowered to make informed decisions for themselves and not have to feel like they need to rely on someone else to make those decisions for them.
that's great. Um, you mentioned the social work aspect, and I do believe that the people who you're training, somebody's going to come to you and say, Dr. Tisa, this is great for finance, but can you apply this to this area? If it hasn't already happened, I believe it's going to happen soon for you. And just be ready because you might have to switch gears a little bit. But the power in
Yeah.
what you're saying and what we're saying right now is genius is supposed to be multiplied. It's never, we're not Kanye at this. We're not trying to say like I can do everything under the sun. Like, some things you should probably not touch. You shouldn't do it.
Mhm.
You should be geared at making sure that you are multiplying and replenishing others so that they can work. Because it's not because genius can't be prideful. It can be, but it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't
It
be.
shouldn't be like I said, you're holding this information so that everybody has to come to you and nobody else can do this but you. And I already know this about you. That's not who you are. That's never been who you've been as long as I've known you. So there's no issue with saying you're a genius because you're just going to take it and do what you said at the very beginning and be like, who else can I empower now because of what I know about myself? And so, the last component as we close out the interview of the equation is purpose, but we've already really explained it. Your purpose in life is to identify your God-given talent and use it as a tool to fix your passion, the thing that you're passionate about, the thing that you hate that's broken in the world. And once you begin to do that, Dr. Silver Canady, you will be unlocking your genius and the genius of others.
Mhm. I believe it.
All
I've
right.
never had anyone put it to me that plainly before, but thank you for that because it makes a lot of sense. And it also, when you have an explanation like that, it can help you think about the things that you're doing and whether those things directly relate to what you're supposed to be doing.
Hey,
And
say
so
that
my
again.
mind is like, oh, you're doing this and you're doing this. Oh, that connects. I definitely feel like I'm walking in my purpose. I really do. And I wish that everyone could feel that feeling,
Me too.
and know what that's like.
That's why I'm doing these one-on-ones. Like I'm trying to get to as many people as I can. The thing about it is when you have, oh man, I think I might have lost what I was getting ready to say. All right, we'll scratch that. But just knowing what this is that's on the inside of you, and then that you can empower others with it, is how this has to spread, right?
Mhm.
It's never about just you, it begins with you, but then it goes to other people. And at the end of the day, this can change the world. Like, quite frankly, it can. Because
Mhm.
now, everybody's like, I have a mission to do. And here's the thing that I lost earlier. You said, hey, once you know this, you can connect, like, oh, this fits with this. But you know what you can also do? You can disconnect some things too. Like,
Mhm.
I shouldn't be doing this.
Yep.
Right? So I love going to middle schools and high schools. I'm gonna close out in a minute. I love going to middle schools and high schools because they're starting to get this question: what do you want to do for college? You should do this. You should do that. But when you know what your genius is, you may discover that you don't need to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
Already be operating in it. And I'm a proponent of college. I'm not trying to make people not go to college, but some people don't need to go. There's plenty of people who have impacted the world who dropped out of college because they was like, I already know this and I don't really need to go into debt or whatever. I don't need to finish off my career. But for those of you who do go to college, now you can choose your major better because your major will revolve around what your genius is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the beautiful thing.
I'm thinking about, what you're doing, and it's empowering people to be able to make a more informed decision. Because I think so many of us were told, oh, you're going to college. Like,
yep, we
it's
sure
not
were.
even the choice.
Yep.
The choice is which college, but you're going to college. And looking back, yeah, that was a good choice for me. But if I had known my genius earlier, then I might have decided, to do something different, and I could have tapped into it earlier. Who knows? But it's really about, for me, like, it's really about that next generation and taking the lessons, including the mistakes, and just trying to help them,
a little sooner and a little quicker than we did.
Exactly, because I definitely made some choices that gave me an extended stay at the University of Delaware. And of course, all of that wraps into where I am now. But for other people, that could be much more costly, and if I can prevent or help them, maybe avoid some of those things, then, I feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to do.
That's why I know I'm talking to the right person, because you're going to do that. Let me ask you this question to close us out. So, Tisa, do you consider yourself now to be a genius?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It didn't take me long once you started walking through it. I'm like, hey, wait a minute now. That sounds like me. And not only does it sound like me, it can be me. And I think that that's the part that that's really hard for some people to accept. Like you were talking about the 10 students in the room that you visited. Like, when you're not used to seeing a certain word attached to people who are like you, or you think it's only reserved for people of a certain stature or whatever, like, you really can't accept it as a possibility. And I have learned in less than an hour that not only is it possible, like, hey, that's me. And I'm walking in that, and I want to keep walking in that. And I want other people to experience that too.
That's what's up. That's a good affirmation for me. I appreciate that. And that's a perfect way to end us. So this has been Reggie Key, guest, and my genius guest, Dr. Tisa, Canady, part of the Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny interview. And it is my uncommon cue to see the genius in you.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode. Make sure you pick up the book, Common Genius, Uncommon Destiny, by my dad, Reggie Legend, available on Amazon and at inkwellspoken.com. Connect with us at inkwellspoken on all social media platforms. If you enjoy our content, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload.